The flame-red sunset bled across the Arizona sky as Abigail Palmer stood on the porch of her newly inherited homestead, her trembling fingers clutching a broken oil lamp that hadn't worked since her father's passing 3 weeks prior. Tomorrow was her wedding day, but the groom was nowhere to be found, and as night approached, the crushing weight of abandonment settled on her shoulders like a burial shroud. Abigail, 22 and now alone in the world, had pinned all her hopes on Howard Benson, a banker's son who had courted her during her father's illness with promises of security and companionship. But as the September evening of 1879 grew darker, matching her spirits, she understood with bitter clarity that Howard would not come. The letter she'd received that morning had been clear. He'd reconsidered marrying a woman with nothing but a dilapidated ranch and mounting debts. "Pa," she whispered, gripping the broken lamp tighter, "I don't know what to do now." The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart leap foolishly before reason tamped down her hope. Howard wouldn't arrive under cover of darkness, not when he'd made his position so painfully clear. She squinted into the twilight, making out the silhouette of a rider tall, broad-shouldered, and definitely not Howard. As the stranger drew closer, Abigail grabbed her father's shotgun leaning against the porch railing. Women alone in the Arizona territory couldn't be too careful. "That's far enough," she called out, raising the shotgun to her shoulder when the rider was about 20 paces from the house. The man halted his horse and slowly raised his hands. "Mean no harm, madam, just looking for shelter for the night, been riding since dawn." "There's a town 10 miles east," Abigail replied, not lowering the gun. 10 miles in the dark is a lot to ask of a tired horse," the man said, his voice deep but gentle. "I can pay or work for my keep." The moonlight caught his face as clouds parted overhead, strong-jawed, stubbled, with eyes that crinkled at the corners. His clothes were travel-worn but not ragged, and the gun at his hip looked like a working tool rather than an outlaw's weapon. "What's your name?" she demanded. "Vincent O'Malley. Most folks call me Vince." Abigail hesitated. Her father had never turned away a traveler in need, and truth be told, the thought of spending what should have been her wedding eve alone was almost unbearable. "One night," she finally said, lowering the shotgun slightly. "The barn's got fresh hay. There's a pump out back for your horse." Vincent O'Malley nodded gratefully, dismounting with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. "Much obliged, Miss Palmer, Abigail Palmer." He led his horse toward the barn, and Abigail returned inside, placing the broken lamp on the kitchen table. The house felt cavernous without her father's booming laugh or the constant creaking of his rocking chair. She stoked the cook stove and put on a pot of coffee, figuring it was the least she could offer her unexpected guest before he bedded down in the barn. A soft knock at the door startled her. Vincent stood there, hat in hand, looking apologetic. "Pardon me, Miss Palmer, but there's a broken fence post by your corral that's about to give way entirely. If you've got tools, I can fix it now before your livestock decides to wander off in the night." Abigail blinked in surprise. "You don't need to do that." "Consider it payment for the shelter," he said with a small smile. "My ma taught me never to take without giving back." She showed him to the tool shed, watching as he selected a hammer, nails, and a length of wood. In the lantern light, she could see him better, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of brewing coffee. His movements were efficient, purposeful. "You know your way around a ranch," she observed. "Worked plenty of them," he replied, heading toward the corral. "Had my own spread up in Montana for a spell." Abigail followed him, curious despite herself. "What brings you to Arizona?" Vincent paused, something flashing across his face too quickly for her to interpret. "Change of scenery," he said simply. "Sometimes a man needs to start fresh." She understood that sentiment all too well. They walked to the corral in silence, and Abigail held the lantern while Vincent worked. His strong hands made quick work of the repair, hammering with practiced efficiency. "There," he said, testing the post's sturdiness. "That should hold. "Thank you," Abigail said softly. "Would you like some coffee before you turn in? It's just brewed." Vincent seemed surprised by the offer but nodded. "That's mighty kind." Back in the kitchen, Abigail poured 2 cups of coffee and set out the last of her sugar. Vincent's eyes fell on the broken lamp at the center of the table. "That's a nice piece," he commented. "Brass is good quality, shame it's not working." Abigail's fingers curled around her cup. "It was my mother's. She died when I was small, but Pa kept it lit every night, said it was like having a piece of her still with us." Her voice caught. "It stopped working just before Pa passed. I've been trying to fix it, but I know nothing about lamps." Vincent set down his coffee cup and reached for the lamp. "May I?" At her nod, he examined it carefully, turning it over in his hands with surprising gentleness for such large fingers. "The wick tube is clogged and the burner assemblies come loose," he observed. "Simple fix if you've got some wire and a small tool kit. You know how to repair lamps?" Abigail asked, surprised. A smile ghosted across his face. "Spent a winter working for a tinsmith in Cheyenne, picked up a few skills." He set the lamp down carefully. "I could fix it for you in the morning if you'd like." "I'd appreciate that," Abigail said, then added without thinking, "especially since there won't be a wedding anymore." Vincent's eyebrows rose, but to his credit, he didn't immediately press for details. Instead, he sipped his coffee, giving her the space to either elaborate or change the subject. The kindness in that simple act loosened something in Abigail's chest. Before she quite realized what was happening, she found herself telling this stranger about Howard, the wedding that wouldn't be, her father's death, and the precarious state of the ranch. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this," she said finally, embarrassed. "You must think I'm a silly, pitiful woman." "No, madam," Vincent said quietly. "I think you're brave. Most people would have buckled under half those troubles." His words warmed her more than they should have. "Well, thank you for listening and for fixing the fence." Vincent tipped his head in acknowledgement and finished his coffee. "I should let you get some rest. Dawn comes early on a ranch." Abigail saw him to the door, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Good night, Mr. O'Malley." "Vince," he corrected gently. "And thank you for the coffee, Miss Palmer." "Abigail," she replied, surprising herself again. His smile in the lamplight made her breath catch for reasons she couldn't explain. "Good night, Abigail." Sleep eluded her that night. Instead of counting sheep, Abigail counted problems: the mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, the cattle that needed to be driven to market, the leaking roof, the broken plow. By dawn, her eyes were gritty with exhaustion, but her mind was made up. She would sell what livestock she could, pay off the most pressing debts, and then see if the general store in town needed help. It wouldn't be the life she'd imagined, but it would be hers to control. She was feeding the chickens when Vincent emerged from the barn, his hair damp from washing at the pump. He nodded a greeting and immediately set to work on the woodpile without being asked, splitting logs with powerful swings of the axe. "You don't have to do that," Abigail called, walking over with a cup of coffee for him. Vincent paused, accepting the cup with a nod of thanks. "Consider it payment for breakfast if you're offering." "Least I can do," she replied, noticing how the morning light softened his features, making him look younger. "Though I warn you, it's just bacon and biscuits." "Sounds like a feast to me," he said with a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Over breakfast, Vincent asked thoughtful questions about the ranch: how many cattle she had, the condition of the equipment, the quality of her grazing land. Abigail found herself answering honestly, not bothering to sugarcoat the dire situation. "Sounds like you need hands," Vincent observed, helping himself to a third biscuit at her insistence. "Can't afford to hire any," Abigail admitted. Vincent was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "I'm heading to California, but I'm in no particular rush. I could stay on a week or two, help get some of these repairs done, maybe even assist with driving your cattle to market. For room and board," he added quickly when he saw her frown. "No wages necessary." Abigail studied him suspiciously. "Why would you do that?" "Because I've been down on my luck before and strangers helped me." he said simply. Besides, I owe you for sparing me another night under the stars with just my horse for company. I can't pay you, Abigail insisted, not asking for pay. Just a roof, meals, and maybe some conversation that doesn't involve my horse ignoring me. Despite her better judgment, Abigail found herself smiling. 1 week, she conceded, but I work alongside you. This isn't a charity case. Wouldn't dream of suggesting otherwise, Vincent replied, his eyes twinkling. True to his word, after breakfast, Vincent retrieved a small leather tool roll from his saddlebags and set to work on the broken lamp while Abigail washed the dishes. She watched covertly as his large hands worked with surprising delicacy, cleaning out the wick tube with a piece of wire, tightening the burner assembly, and polishing the brass until it gleamed in the morning light. "Let's see if she works now," he said, filling the lamp with oil from a can in the pantry. He struck a match, and a moment later, a warm, steady flame flickered to life. Abigail's breath caught in her throat. "You fixed it," she whispered, reaching out to touch the lamp's brass base reverently. "Pa would be so pleased." "It's a good lamp," Vincent said softly. "Just needed some care." Their eyes met over the dancing flame, and something passed between them, a current of understanding, of shared appreciation for things that endured. The day passed in a blur of activity. They mended fences, repaired a leak in the barn roof, and Vincent examined the broken plow, declaring it fixable with parts from town. By sundown, Abigail's muscles ached, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. Over a simple dinner of beans, cornbread, and the last of the bacon, Vincent told stories of his travels, cattle drives through Wyoming, winters in Colorado mining towns, a brief stint as a sheriff's deputy in a New Mexico settlement too small to warrant a spot on most maps. "You've lived quite a life," Abigail observed, pouring him more coffee. Vincent shrugged. "Just been moving a lot, not sure that counts as living." "Why so much moving?" she asked, then quickly added, "if you don't mind my asking." He was quiet for so long that Abigail thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Had a ranch in Montana. Wife, son, good land. There was a dispute with a neighbor over water rights. Things escalated." His voice grew distant. "One night they came, burned us out. My wife and boy were trapped inside." Abigail's hand flew to her mouth. "Dear God," she whispered. Vincent's eyes were fixed on something far away. "I was in town that night. By the time I got back, there was nothing left. The men responsible were connected to the territorial governor. Law did nothing." "So you took justice into your own hands," Abigail said softly, understanding now why he was heading west, why he never stayed in one place too long. Vincent's gaze returned to her, sharp and assessing. "What makes you say that? The way you carry your gun. The way you watch the horizon when you think I'm not looking." She paused. "The sorrow that doesn't leave your eyes even when you smile." He looked down at his coffee cup. "Been 5 years now. I'm not running anymore, just drifting, trying to find a reason to stop somewhere." Abigail reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Vince." That night, with the repaired lamp glowing softly on the kitchen table, Abigail lay awake thinking about the quiet cowboy sleeping in her barn, a man carrying wounds far deeper than her own, yet who had stopped to help fix her broken fences and her mother's lamp. The next morning, they rode together to check on the cattle in the north pasture. Abigail was pleased to see the small herd looking healthy despite her limited knowledge of ranching. "Your father picked good stock," Vincent observed. "These should fetch a fair price in Tucson." "If I can get them there," Abigail said doubtfully. "I've never driven cattle before." "It's not so difficult with a small herd like this. I could show you," Vincent offered. They spent the day with the cattle, with Vincent patiently teaching Abigail the basics of herding. She was a quick study, and by late afternoon she was confidently moving the animals from one pasture to another. "You're a natural," Vincent said, genuine admiration in his voice. Abigail felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. "I had a good teacher." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, Abigail found herself studying Vincent's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar near his right temple, the way his eyes seemed to hold both warmth and wariness at once. "What will you do in California?" she asked. Vincent shrugged. "Find work, I suppose, maybe save up for a small place of my own eventually." "No more ranching. Didn't think I wanted to," he admitted. "Brings back too many memories, but being here." He glanced around at her land. "It reminds me of the good parts before everything went wrong. This place has always been home to me," Abigail said softly. "Even when Pa was at his worst with drinking after Ma died, the land was constant. I can't bear the thought of losing it." Vincent nodded in understanding. "Land gets in your blood." The days fell into a rhythm, working from sunrise to sunset, meals shared over increasingly comfortable conversation, evenings on the porch with the repaired lamp glowing through the window behind them. 1 week stretched into 2, and neither of them mentioned Vincent's departure. They drove the cattle to market in Tucson together, camping under the stars for 3 nights. Abigail discovered she enjoyed sleeping in the open air, listening to Vincent's soft guitar playing as the campfire burned low. He taught her trail songs and told her stories of the constellations overhead. The cattle sold for more than Abigail had hoped, enough to pay the mortgage for several months and purchase supplies they desperately needed. As they rode back to the ranch, laden with provisions, Abigail felt a newfound confidence in her ability to keep her home. "I couldn't have done this without you," she told Vincent as they crested the hill overlooking her land. "You'd have found a way," he replied. "You're stronger than you know, Abigail." The way he said her name made her heart flutter in a manner that both thrilled and terrified her. She was falling for this quiet, honorable man with the troubled past, and she had no idea if he felt anything similar or if he still planned to continue his journey west. That night, a fierce storm rolled in from the mountains. The wind howled around the eaves of the house, and rain lashed against the windows with such force that Abigail worried about the barn roof they'd repaired. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunderclaps that shook the floorboards. Unable to bear the thought of Vincent alone in the drafty barn, Abigail threw a shawl over her nightdress and ran through the downpour. She found him in the stall beside his horse, using his body to calm the nervous animal. "Vince," she shouted over the storm, "come to the house." "This roof won't hold in wind like this," he hesitated, looking at his horse. "Bring him too," Abigail added. "The old storeroom off the kitchen has a separate entrance. It's dry and sheltered." Vincent nodded, quickly saddling his horse and following Abigail through the torrential rain to the house. They led the animal into the storeroom, which was indeed dry and large enough for the horse to be comfortable. Once the horse was settled, they stood dripping in the kitchen, both soaked to the skin. Abigail became acutely aware of her thin nightdress clinging to her body and turned away, cheeks burning. "I'll get you some dry clothes," she said, hurrying to her father's room to find a shirt and trousers that might fit Vincent's taller frame. When she returned, Vincent had removed his soaked shirt and was drying his hair with a kitchen towel. The sight of his bare chest, broad and muscled, marked with scars that told stories of a hard life, made her breath catch. She thrust the dry clothes at him, keeping her eyes firmly on the floor. "Thank you," he said, taking them from her. "You should change too before you catch cold." Abigail nodded and retreated to her bedroom, changing into a dry nightdress and wrapping her heaviest shawl around her shoulders. When she returned to the kitchen, Vincent was dressed in her father's clothes, stoking the fire in the cookstove to ward off the chill. The repaired lamp cast a gentle glow over the kitchen as the storm raged outside. Abigail made hot tea and they sat at the table, listening to the thunder and the rain hammering on the roof. "Thank you for thinking of my horse," Vincent said after a while. "Not everyone would have." "He's a fine animal," Abigail replied, "and important to you." Vincent's eyes met hers across the table. "You notice things about people. It's a rare quality. When you grow up with a father who says little, you learn to watch instead of listen," she explained. She hesitated, then added, "I've been watching you, Vince O'Malley. You're a good man who's seen bad things." The lamp's flame flickered as a particularly strong gust of wind found its way down the chimney. Vincent's gaze dropped to the dancing light. "I didn't just drift here by accident, Abigail," he admitted quietly. "I'd heard about your father's passing in town a few days before. Folks were talking about his daughter trying to run the place alone." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I didn't plan to stay. Just thought I'd check if you needed help before moving on." "And now?" Abigail asked, her heart pounding. Vincent was silent for a long moment, the lamp casting half his face in shadow. "Now I find myself not wanting to leave." The words hung between them, weighted with possibility. Abigail reached across the table, her fingers touching the back of his hand. "Then don't." Their eyes locked, and something elemental passed between them, understanding, longing, the recognition of kindred spirits who had both known loss and were afraid to hope again. Vincent turned his hand over, his calloused palm against hers. "I've got blood on my hands, Abigail. The men who killed my family, I found them, all three." "I figured as much," she said softly. "Does anyone come looking for you?" He shook his head. "It was clean, self-defense when they drew on me." "But that doesn't make it right. And it doesn't make you wrong," Abigail countered. "You protected what was yours, and when that failed, you sought justice. My father would have done the same." A flash of lightning illuminated the kitchen, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The lamp flame jumped wildly, then steadied again. "I haven't felt at peace anywhere since Montana," Vincent confessed. "Not until these weeks here with you." Abigail's heart soared at his words, but caution made her ask, "Are you certain it's not just the ranch you're drawn to?" "The familiar work, the land," Vincent's fingers tightened around hers. "The land is part of it," he acknowledged. "But it's you, Abigail, your strength, your kindness, the way you face each day with determination even when things seem impossible." His voice lowered. "The way you looked at that lamp when I fixed it, like something precious had been returned to you." Abigail felt tears spring to her eyes. "I was supposed to be married by now," she whispered, "to a man who abandoned me at the first sign of hardship." "His loss," Vincent said simply. "Some men can't recognize true value when they see it." The storm's intensity seemed to peak around them, rain lashing the windows with renewed fury. Yet inside the kitchen, with the repaired lamp casting its steady glow, Abigail felt safer than she had in months. "Stay," she said again, more firmly this time. "Not just tonight, not just for a while. Stay with me, Vince. We can rebuild this place together." He rose from his chair and came around the table, kneeling beside her. His hands, rough from work yet gentle in their touch, cradled her face. "Are you certain I'm not a man with prospects or wealth?" "I've had a taste of that," Abigail replied. "It proved worthless. I'd rather have a man I can trust, who knows the value of hard work and keeping his word." She covered his hands with her own. "A man who can fix what's broken." Vincent's smile was slow and wondering. "I think I've been making my way to you for 5 years without knowing it." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a long journey. His lips were warm and sure against hers, promising shelter, understanding, and a love built on stronger foundations than mere convenience or social expectation. The lamp burned steadily through the night as the storm gradually subsided. By dawn, the sky had cleared, revealing a washed, clean world glittering with raindrops in the rising sun. They were married 2 months later in the small church in town, with neighbors and ranchers from miles around attending. The story of how Vincent had stopped to help the abandoned bride had spread, becoming something of a local legend already. Abigail wore her mother's dress, and Vincent wore a new suit purchased with profits from their first successful cattle sale together. The repaired lamp sat in the window of their home, visible from the church steps, a beacon guiding them back to where their life together had begun. Over the years, the Palmer O'Malley ranch prospered under their joint care. Vincent's experience and Abigail's determination proved a powerful combination. They added to the herd, repaired buildings, and eventually built a larger house when their family began to grow, first with twins, a boy and girl named Thomas and Sarah. Then 3 years later with another daughter they called Margaret, after Vincent's late wife. Vincent spoke often to the children about their namesakes, ensuring that the past was honored even as they built their future. Abigail watched him teach their son to ride, their daughters to rope cattle, all of them to respect the land that sustained them. The lamp remained a fixture in their home, lit each night without fail. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent presented Abigail with a silver plate to affix to its base, engraved with the words, "What was broken can be mended. What was dark can shine again." In 1899, as the century drew to a close, Abigail and Vincent sat on their porch, gray beginning to thread through their hair, watching their children play in the yard with the dogs. The ranch had grown to 3 times its original size, and their cattle were known throughout the territory for their quality. "Did you ever imagine this?" Abigail asked, her hand finding his as it had countless times over the years. "That night in the storm when you decided to stay." Vincent's eyes, still as warm and kind as the day they'd met, crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "I hoped," he said. "But this," he gestured to their thriving ranch, their healthy children, the life they'd built together. "This is better than any dream I dared to have." Inside the house, visible through the window behind them, the lamp burned steady and bright, a testament to all that could be rebuilt, rekindled, and reborn with patience, care, and love.